If I just show you a disgusting guy's bedroom.
The bathroom's behind that.
Tom's room is a working construction site.
People be having, whipped cream parties. You'd be whipping.
That's gonna pique your curiosity enough to stay.
Adam Faze is rewriting the rules of entertainment.
I'd never posted a video on TikTok in my entire life, and 24 hours later had 1 million views.
He's creating shows that are transforming how we consume content.
Reality TV in general is very good at hooking you. We are 1000% still in the wild, wild west, which is both really exciting and also at times frustrating.
It's a revolution in storytelling.
If Hollywood isn't having a fight in this race, there might not be a Hollywood tomorrow.
We had a brief chat in France.
Yes.
And I felt like it was like almost too brief.
100%.
Because I was like, what do you do? And you were like, I'm making TV shows on TikTok. And I was like, so much to take in that sentence. What is it? How do you describe it still the same way?
100%. I mean, the way I describe it is I think short form content is the closest thing we have to cable television today. And so for me, I spent almost a decade working as a producer in like traditional film and television. And if you told me 5 years ago I was working in digital, I would have told you were crazy. But it took a global pandemic and me getting addicted to TikTok and having so much fun every night watching some of the best content I've ever seen to realize if Hollywood isn't having a fight in this race, there might not be a Hollywood tomorrow. And so flash forward 2 years, now running a studio that like primarily focus on creating original short form content that looks and feels like TV shows, but happens to be 90 seconds or 2.5 minutes long. And it's the first time in all of those 10 years that I can walk down the street and talk to a stranger about the shows that I've made, and they almost always have seen it.
I've seen Boy Room. And last night I was talking to my girlfriend and she was like, who are you talking to? And I showed her, and instead of like having the conversation about you, we just ended up watching Boy Room for like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And she was like, that guy, that room is disgusting.
Yeah.
Let's watch another one. And we were just watching for a while and she was like, I've seen this before.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can always talk about the TikTok that you've seen before.
Yes.
And you can talk about the creator that you've seen before. But you never think about that TikTok show
Yes.
that I've seen before. And that sounds like a weird revelation now.
It does.
And it feels like there's two people doing it and you're one of them.
Well, that's what's really crazy is like I remember, almost exactly 2 years ago was the first time that I ever like was working for a company and I told them, hey, I think TikTok might be television. Can you give me a budget to go make TV shows for TikTok? And like they were like, what are you talking about? And we started making these shows, and the first one was called Keep the Meter Running with a good friend of mine named Kareem Rama. And he was like, I've always wanted to hail a cab in New York and tell the driver, take me to your favorite place and keep the meter running. I was like, I just want to watch that. Like that sounds like an amazing idea. Make that show. It ends up getting 400,000 followers and like 200 million views and change. And at that point, any adults in the room that I would still talk to being like, yeah, I'm making shows for TikTok. They're like, what do you mean show? You mean like it's videos on a TikTok account, like the dance app, that sort of thing. And what's funny now, 2 years later, is being sent decks from other, whether it's producers or studios or agencies or companies that are all pitching like short form TV shows on TikTok and using our shows as the example of like what they want to create.
Yeah.
And so what's cool though is like, it might have taken 2 years for the adults to figure that out. Any kid at that point that I was talking to who had seen our shows are coming up to Kareem, they're coming up to me, and they're interrupting saying like, I'm so sorry, like this is my favorite show. And like they knew it was a show without anyone having to tell them that word. And so I just think that goes to show that like, we are more traditional because of the way that we were raised and the way that we consumed content. But as much as I came home from school and turned on TV every single day, these kids have never once done that. They've only opened TikTok after school, and probably at school.
Do you feel like does it still feel like you're too early?
Totally. Like we are 1000% still in the wild, wild west, which is both really exciting and also at times frustrating. Because like there are times where, I feel like I've lived in this headspace for 2 years now. So I obviously know a lot about this space and I have a lot of opinions about what works and what doesn't work. And what's frustrating is when you talk to a brand that still really does not understand TikTok whatsoever, and they start asking for certain things, we are like, no, but this literally just doesn't work. And I have to at times stop myself from being frustrated by realizing like, I forget how new this is, and a bit of my job has to be like a hand-holding process. And I think it's going to be funny 5 years from now when we look back and realize like, oh, holy shit, this is where it all began. And what feels like it's taking a long time now is, in retrospect, no time at all.
You just told the story about Keep the Meter Running, and Kareem's show on the train, and it feels like when you say we developed that show, it feels like when a TV person or whatever's watching, like, okay, then they went into pre-pro.
Yes.
But you were like shooting the next day.
Yeah, basically, I sat Kareem down. I was like, "You're one of the funniest people I know. I'm obsessed with you. Pitch me ideas for shows." And he pitched me 5 ideas. The first 4 were decent, but like not fully there yet. And he was like, "I got this one, but no one wants it." And I was like, "Tell me immediately." And he tells me the idea for Keep the Meter Running. And it was such a no-brainer that I said to, he was like, "You're not going to want to make this, whatever." I was like, "Let's go tomorrow." And so me and the director of the show, Ari Kagan, picked up our Sony FX3s and we stand on 8th Avenue trying to hail a cab. It takes 8 times trying to get a cab driver to say yes because they're kind of like freaked out. Like, "Why do you have cameras? What are you asking me for?"
Yeah.
Eventually get in a cab with this guy, Abdur Rauf Khan, and he ends up taking us to this amazing restaurant in Queens for Pakistani food. And it was, in the moment, so special that in our minds there was no world in which this didn't work. But mind you, at this point, I'd never made a digital show before.
Yeah.
I'd never posted a video on TikTok in my entire life. And so we created a new account with 0 followers, and we uploaded this video not expecting anything. And 24 hours later, it had 1 million views. And that next day, Kareem is being stopped in the street by people saying, like, "You're the cab guy." And he's like looking around, like, who are they talking to?
So interesting.
And it's just like, oh, this is local television. Like, of those 1 million views, 999,000 are in New York City. So of course he's being stopped in the street.
Right. What's the process now of like coming up with ideas, trying those ideas, getting them out, testing them? Okay, this one works. Like, what's that process like now?
It's a combo, because I think there's still always going to be ideas that come from me or people on our team that just like really hooked on a certain concept. Other times, we get around 25 to 30 pitches a week from comedians and creators and traditional producers. And so, when it's a good idea. You have that gut feeling. And with Boy Room in particular, Rachel Coster, who hosts that show, I found in a comedy club one night, and she had like 3,000 followers on Instagram, except it was abundantly clear that she was a star. She literally just had that like aura. It was like, who are you?
Yeah.
She comes in, pitches me a few ideas for shows. And again, Boy Room was the last idea on the list. I said, Boy Room needs a better name. I'm obsessed with men's bedrooms, and I want to investigate them. I was like, that's it.
You're like, it's an amazing name.
That's. I was like, first of all, the name is perfect.
Yeah,
We're not
that's the
changing
best
the name.
part.
Yeah. And literally 48 hours later, we showed up with cameras with Rachel at one of my best friend's houses, unannounced, to shoot an episode of Boy Room. And he was so pissed off because his place was absolutely disgusting. And that episode has also never seen the light of day because I almost lost a friendship that day. But it's the best episode, in my opinion. And we watched the episode internally. We're just like, this is a hit show. This is it.
You make that pilot of Boy Room, and you're like, this is awesome. We can't air this. Let's go make more.
Yes.
Interesting.
And so that's the thing. I mean, like, for a lot of it's still gut feeling. We will cancel a show if we don't think it reaches like a critical mass of like 8 or 9 episodes. And so with Boy Room in particular, what was interesting is that we post the first 2 episodes on Instagram and TikTok. Instagram, each episode gets around like 200,000 views, which was honestly great for us. We had not before had great traction on Instagram. And on TikTok, we had a collective 300 views total. And we're sitting there being like, well, this is strange because this is an amazing show in our opinion. And like, we figured people would fall in love with it. And so we go in the back end of the TikTok app to see what's going on. And we can see that 98% of the people watching it on the For You page are dropping off here for the first 2 seconds. So we're like, what's happening in the first 2 seconds? It's an intro where Rachel's saying, welcome to Boy Room, the show where we investigate boys' rooms. We're like, maybe it's just like 2 in people's faces. Like, let's drop the intro, post episode 3, same account, and let's just see what happens. And we post it, and I go to a meeting in like Long Island City or something, and I'm like nervous. I'm trying not to check the app, and then I check it, and it's like hour after posting has 500 likes. I'm like, that's way more than we've had before. Yeah. And then 10 minutes later, it's got 1,000 likes, and I call Ari and Damien on my team. I'm like, it's happening. They're like, don't jinx it. You're gonna jinx it for us. I was like, no. Like, it's fully happening. I come back to the office with a bottle of champagne, and within 24 hours. Now those first 3 episodes on TikTok had a collective 4 million views, and the account had 60,000 followers. And it was just one of those things where like a simple fix is what made the thing finally work.
Did that kind of break your brain on like, oh, I'm making intros because that's what I do for TV?
Totally.
And I just need to get in the
Totally.
fucking
And also, even YouTube is like that too. Like YouTube, they very much train you that in the first, 5 seconds, very much introduce what you're doing and introduce the hook of this thing. Audiences are really smart. You don't need to spoon feed them information. And also you have to give them credit for the fact that like if they are consuming something on TikTok, I know me personally, I'm probably consuming 200 videos in a sitting of TikTok. And like that includes, some horrific thing happening in the news to some really stupid meme to a dance video. Yeah. And so it's like if I am scrolling and all of a sudden seeing a show for the first time and it's probably 2 a.m. and I'm in bed, you don't want to be like startled with
Here's the show.
It's like, shut up,
Just tell them.
But if I just show you a disgusting guy's bedroom, that's going to pique your curiosity enough to stay.
Yeah. It also feels like we don't realize that there is a title and it is ever like present.
Yes.
And there's a description and your eye can go there and it's like, what the fuck am I watching? Oh, that's what I'm watching. And like YouTube is even more that where like you have read the title and done everything before you've jumped into this thing. I see that in advertising as well where like people are like, but we need to put our logo in there. Like,
I know. In the first 3 seconds, by the way, logo right in the middle, and
even
then
if
the name of the series.
And you're just like, they can fucking see your name. It's like signing your text saying "Love, Dad." Like I know who you are. I know you're like LaCroix or whatever the fuck the thing is. Okay, so you make Boy Room, just using it as an example, and then it works, and you make more episodes. How does that? How do you kind of like chunk it out and say, okay, we're gonna extend this for like another season, whether that's 3 episodes or not?
We had the intention of doing like a first season of around 14 episodes. And we thought that at that point we can engage brands of how they can integrate into the show itself. Like a very important thing to note is that there is $0 to make on TikTok itself. The monetization is awful. I don't blame them for it because at the end of the day, you're scrolling between a bunch of videos. It's not an ad attached to your video. It's ads in between the 200 videos you're watching.
Right. It's TV.
So it's hard for you to be able to make an argument of like, well, I'm deserved this much money from you. The platform's always going to make more money. So knowing that you're not going to make any money from TikTok, brand integration becomes the next thing that you think about. And so for me, that's really important for the greenlighting process of a show. I have to think, if this show is to work, where could a brand fit inside of this? And so part of the reason I love the idea for Boy Room so much is I was like, if this does become a hit, this can be a home renovation show. And maybe we can partner with an e-commerce company to start renovating these men's bedrooms. And so with Boy Room, 14 episodes, 250,000 followers organically, 25 million views, press in every major publication on earth. It was like a perfect firestorm to engage those brands. And so I don't think I can say who yet, but then now we're bringing it back for a 16-episode season.
All branded.
Yeah. Where we're renovating 16 men's bedrooms across the country in 4 cities, Atlanta, Austin, LA, New York, with furniture from this e-commerce partner. Got it. And it allows not only the show to exist, but us to make a version of the show that our audience had been asking us for. Like the most common comment was like tagging brands from our fans saying like, please sponsor the show. All we want to see is the renovation.
So interesting. Because the first part of the show is just like photoshopped versions of what you would
do. In the first 14 episodes, is like at the end of the episode, Rachel, our host, gives a vision of what she wants to do for the room. And it's like, we'd replace this pile of junk with a desk, and we'd replace this futon with an actual bed.
Yeah. We watched a few episodes of it, and my girlfriend was like, are they actually changing the thing? I'm like, no, it's Photoshop.
Yeah.
And it's just like your mind doesn't, you've seen those shows before,
Yes.
and you're like, okay, this is what it ends up in.
Yes.
And it's just, again, thinking about production differently, where like you said the first time you were doing Bodega Run, you built the set. And you were like, fuck. Then I learned never build the set first, build the show first.
Yeah.
And all of your show, like everything from Keep the Meter Running to Bodega Run to like, you're filming in these real locations.
Yes.
And if it becomes something, do you see yourself building a set, or you're just like, you know what, the real world's a way better set now?
Totally. I mean, I think, look, at the end of the day, it's a few things. One, it's always smart to spend as little money up front as possible because you really just never know with these things if they're going to hit or not. The other is, I actually think that the audience wants to feel like they had a part in making this big. And I think if you start off the gates with something so flashy, so premium, you're not really giving room for them to like invest in you. And like, I fully believe that when Boy Room Season 2 comes out, the response from our audience is going to be like, good job. Like, you did it. Like, you got a sponsor.
You made
it.
Yeah.
And so on the set level, like right now, for instance, we're thinking about making a small claims court show. I'm a huge fan of Judge Judy. I've always wanted to make a small claims court show. Unfortunately, there's not that many great court sets in New York City. There are so many amazing ones in LA, but we don't want to film the show in LA. And so I think it's funny that this first season of the show would exist in a pretty shitty courtroom set. And then if it becomes the biggest thing in the world, great. We can go build a full-time set that's just never going to go away. But like, let's get there. Let's cross that bridge when we get there.
Is it always talent first? Or is it you sometimes that concept and say, okay, we need to cast a talent in this?
I would say 75% talent first. Because like there's other times like small claims court, for instance, where I'm just obsessed with the format. And so it just stays on my board of ideas for like a year of like, I want to make this, but I can't make it till there's the right idea in this with the right person. And so funnily enough on the court show, like that happened this week. Someone pitched me a show and it was exactly in the lane that I wanted to do it, but it was a very different idea than what I was thinking. And it's the right idea. So it's like, there we go. Or we're about to do a nail salon talk show with this insanely talented nail artist. I had that idea like a year and a half ago. Like I've seen a million barbershop talk shows. I've never seen a nail salon talk show. Like, what are we doing? I interviewed 20 nail artists trying to find the right person. Eventually found someone who I hopped on the phone with for what was supposed to be 30 minutes and ended up talking for 4 hours. And I'm like, you're the host.
Yeah.
And so in the cases where it's not a Rachel Coster pitching me an idea, it's like we have this idea, but we still need to find the right talent for it.
And what is that? Okay, so what does that deal process look like? And I'm sure it changes over time, whether it's hitting or not hitting.
It really changes also based on like what is our relationship with the talent. Like in a case where they are hosting and creating a show, they are equity owners in the show, they are partners in the show, and we want to incentivize everyone that like if this thing works, like let's let all boats rise to the tide. In the case of something like the nail salon show, where we really want to be partners with our hosts because we think there are eventually like products and merch and maybe a nail line that can come out of a show like that. That's more like equal ownership. Let's actually be like true business partners here.
You're launching your first brand, like
Real brand
integration,
partnership.
real brand
Yeah.
partnership. What has been the major turnoff of not being able to do it in the past?
Well, I think it's interesting. When we started this company, my intention was originally having ideas for shows on our slate that we actually then, before we launched the shows, talked to brands about being our partner on. And like, great, let's own these things 50-50. You guys finance them. It's going to be an integrated ad from day one. And what you realize is the conversation you have just said, which is like a brand wants their logo somewhere and this and that. And they move so slowly and their budgets are complicated that if we tried to launch Boy Room with a brand on day one, I don't think the show would still have come out. It's only because we had our own financing and our own creative team that we could launch that show within 2 weeks of being pitched. That's like light speed.
How important is that speed?
It's to me, it's super important because it's like, let's see this idea works. If it doesn't work, let's move on. But like, why are we wasting 6 months on this? Why are we wasting a year?
Not even like sit in your consciousness for that long.
Because it's also like you can find out tomorrow if it works or not. Like that's the beauty of these platforms. It's like the audiences will tell you the algorithms work correctly. I've never fought with the algorithm. Like anything that hasn't performed, I've always been like, yeah, it's not good.
What's the longevity of these shows? Like and we might not know yet, but what's the longevity of these shows?
I think a little too soon to say. I mean, at the end of the day, like, look, the longest lasting TV shows ever, unless it's like a news or interview format, are usually like 8 seasons. Like people at a certain point do like turn off. I think one thing that we're trying to do is not flood the waves with content. So like we've still only posted 14 episodes of Boy Room. The show launched in March. We're about to launch a new 16 episode season that's going to be 1 episode a week. Like I want our audience to miss it so that when it comes back, they binge it.
Right.
And not everyone has that approach. A lot of people do want to do like, I have to post every single week. And that probably works for them too. But I'm a little scared of audiences being like, I've seen enough.
You're saying, let's make a funny video about the thing, and if it works, let's go develop that product. Is that going to forever change how we do product?
I think so, because like, wouldn't you want to know that confidence? And again, like, it can be that we have an idea for a product that we just really want to make, and then we can work backwards and be like, okay, if we want to make that product a year from now, what's a show that we can introduce that with, where our audience thinks that they came up with the idea for the product by watching the show?
How important is that piece? Like I heard you say that a couple times.
I think it's super important because I really think that this generation has been sold to since the day they were born, and so it should be their idea if the product gets made. 'Cause even, by the way, even if I have this idea that I want this product to come out a year from now, if the audience doesn't want it, we're not going to make it. But we can focus on making a show that we really love to begin with and get them to fall in love with it. And if they really want that thing that we want, then amazing. We have the confidence to actually like double down on that strategy and like know exactly how many we're going to sell of something. For me, when I think about like what does the next generation of clothing companies look like, the next generation of streetwear companies, in my opinion, they will all be started by content strategies. Like they're all going to be started by TV shows essentially. And whether that's a friend group that you're obsessed with that turns into Happy Dad being a likely billion-dollar drink enterprise, I think like the next Jackass will probably start a clothing brand called Jackass, and that will be a multi-million-dollar industry for them. And it's hard for me to think of why a clothing brand should exist if it's not that anymore.
How does Hollywood exist now? Like, where's that going?
Look, I'm not a complete doom and gloomer because I really do think movies and TV shows have a place in our life. In my opinion, we already watch far fewer of them. I do think that means that the ones that we all collectively watch together matter that much more. Like, I will be the first to say that like the impact that a movie like Get Out has when it comes out cannot be done in any other medium. And especially in this like everyone saw it opening weekend, everyone's talking about it on Twitter.
Everyone's still having the same nightmare
Yes.
fucking 7 years later.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like that is the power of movies. That's the power of Hollywood. As a producer who wants to make as many hits as possible, for me, when I see that I can be in these platforms that the world is on every single night and there's a shortage of high quality content, I would much rather spend my time trying to develop new intellectual property for those platforms than the one movie a year that everyone's going to talk about. And great, if we make a name for ourselves here, maybe there's a world where one day we can have an opportunity to make movies and TV shows. But I'm a lot more realistic with myself now than I was like 6 years ago as a young producer, where I'm like, I'm not convinced that anyone would go to the movies or TV for something that we're making right now. So let's not ask that much of them yet.
Right.
And let's just ask for 2 minutes of their time first.
Yeah. Why do you think Quibi didn't work?
Great question. I get asked this all the time. I think it just was the world's worst idea with good intentions. Because like what Katzenberg wasn't wrong about was he was like, people have shorter attention spans. They want to watch video on the go. That's correct. You had the right data. Building a platform that costs money for A-list Hollywood talent that zero young person either knows or cares about. And on top of that, bragging about spending HBO level budgets on digital content. Some of the worst ideas of all time.
Yeah.
And there's not a single show on that slate that you could show me and be like, but that was a really good show. Like it's the scripts that Hollywood didn't even want in the first place.
Right.
And it's funny because when it flopped, there was a huge PR push. I'm sure they spent 50 of the last $1 million they had on this PR push that said essentially, it didn't work because of COVID. You know, we made this app to be watched on the go.
Yeah.
And there was no go anymore. You had nothing but time at your
Meanwhile,
house.
TikTok was blowing
TikTok
up.
and the number one app in the world. So it's like, love this publicist-driven theory.
Yeah.
And that the reason Quibi didn't work is you couldn't stream it on your TV for some reason. TikTok was the number one app in the world and continues to be ever since the pandemic happened. Clearly, it wasn't the on-the-go issue.
It felt like they were spending TV show money
Yes.
and making TikToks.
Yes.
And not the TikTok amount of testing. Like you can test stuff so fast and be like, well, that doesn't work. But good thing we only spent like $1,500 on
Yes.
that. Let's go to the next idea.
Exactly. That's also, by the way, why unscripted is easier of a space to start than scripted. Like I almost describe unscripted as like our Tesla Roadster. Like it's the thing that like we know has an audience. It's the thing that we know how to monetize. And if we can be the best at doing this, maybe there's a world in which one day we can do scripted things.
Do you see any of the unscripted turning into scripted?
It depends.
Or does it lose its magic?
I think it loses its magic. Like I'm pretty religious about like our shows being real. We get accused of our shows being fake a lot, and I only laugh because our shows are so hard to make because they're so real. Like there's not a single episode of Boy Room that's fake.
All those fucking messy rooms are real.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of times we get DMs from guys trying to come on the show, and you can tell they made their room messier than what it was before. And it's like, you just want to be on this show. Like, you're weird. I don't want you on this show.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I want the guy that is either so proud of their mess or is like, has a girlfriend that's like, please help my boyfriend. His room is disgusting. You know?
Right. Yeah. Boy Room does better on TikTok. Bodega runs seemingly does better on YouTube. Why? Do
At
you
the
know?
end of the day,
do you
every
know,
platform
or
has
do you
its,
care?
I do know. I mean, every platform does have a different audience. It has a different age group. Like, even on Boy Room, the average viewer on TikTok is a 24-year-old woman. On Instagram, it's a 34-year-old woman. It's a different demographic. And so, YouTube, I would always say, is the youngest audience. TikTok is the second youngest audience, and Instagram is always the oldest audience. And then X exists in its own hellscape. I think at the end of the day, you are going to have shows that are bigger on one platform than the other, and it's just the nature of what that format is. Granted, I canceled Bodega Run, and that was really just because, like, what I look for and what I consider to be success in a show is consistency of viewership. I hate lopsided viewership. So on TikTok, the first 3 episodes of Bodega Run had 10 million views. Crazy for us. The average of the next 8 episodes was like 20,000 views. And it's like, yeah, this was like a skit. Like, people liked it for one video. They thought it was funny and they shared it with their friends. They're not coming back to watch this. No one's in the comments being like, this is the best idea. I'm in. Give me 1,000 more episodes, which is what the responsibility with Boy Room is, or Keep the Meter Running is. And that's the feeling I want to have from our audience every single time. Otherwise, we should not be making the show.
How often do you go through that cycle of, like, let's analyze all our shows? Let's see what we cancel.
I mean, for me, every single day. Like, I'm obsessed with looking at the numbers. I'm obsessed with reading the comments. I'm obsessed with even, like, looking at the accounts of people who follow our shows. I want to know as much as possible about these people because it's a relationship. And I want to make sure that we're making the show better based on what they want it to be. And so, like, there are times that we have taken notes from the comments of Boy Room to, like, infer how we should shoot the next episode. And that's really helpful. Like, again, like, Hollywood doesn't have that relationship. No one can be on Twitter and complain about an HBO show and the next week it looks different. Like, we actually can do that. And again, that's also the power of unscripted. It's like, when we're shooting on location and we have a 3-person crew, max 4-person crew, we're shooting 3 episodes in a day. We can then go change exactly how we shoot the next 3 episodes. Like, that's just literally impossible for Hollywood to do.
Was it hard canceling Bodega Run because it was one of your first? Not at all.
No. I hated the show. I want to be the biggest fan of everything we make. And if I scroll past what we're making, like, it's not a good show. And I just, like, refuse to get to a place where, like, we make TikTok content. And Bodega Run is starting to feel like what people would expect a TikTok TV show to look like. I would call it brain rot. And that's not to say that we spent a lot of time working on it, and there's a lot of magic that went into going make that show. There's a lot of hard work done. But at the end of the day, it was like a phoning in to try to make something that could monetize easily, which is the worst way to think about shows.
Could you monetize that easily?
Our idea was, like, if we could turn this into the next Price is Right, the entirety of Price is Right is an ad, right? Every product that's ever mentioned is paid for by a brand. So if we can create this format that gets 1 million viewers an episode that's about products, CPG products, we will be the best friend of every brand on earth. That was the idea. Again, that's like an evil part of our brain saying, like, let's make this show because we'll make a lot of money, which is not the way we should do it. Sure, we have to think about monetization, but we have to think about the best idea first.
Yeah. What do you take inspiration from old TV shows? Do you ever, like, go sit and say, like, oh, this TV show, I forgot about this guy?
I mean, I think one thing is, like, evergreen formats are evergreen. And so, like, there are certain things like a Judge Judy where you're like, if there's been a concept for a show that's been remade by 20 different studios over 50 years,
it works.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is this generation has likely never seen or interacted with a format like that. So there is a fun party that gets to say, like, what are my favorite things I grew up watching? And, like, what would a newer version of that look like today? Or, like, what are things we can tap into there? I do think early days on MTV Unscripted has, like, a lot of inspiration of not taking itself too seriously, having a really fun tone and edge to it that, like, I strive for with everything we do at Gymnasium. But, other times there's those ideas that you love. We made a watch show called Clockwork Dynasty that before that was called Buying Time, better name in my opinion. That was really inspired by Pawn Stars. Buying Time I made when I was at the previous company I was at, so I had to, like, reinvent the IP.
Yeah.
Clockwork Dynasty, way too many letters.
Yeah.
But it was very inspired by Pawn Stars, like, because when I look at a show like Pawn Stars, I can't stop watching it. And I think when we're talking about a platform where people are swipe friendly of wanting to swipe after 3 seconds, you think about, like, what are those formats on TV that, like, people just can't stop watching? And for me, I think about Small Claims Court. I think about, like, a show like Cops. And I think a show like Pawn Stars, like reality TV in general, is very good at hooking you every few seconds with drama. And that's what you need.
What does your team look like?
So I have a co-founder who I adore, named Sahir Mathrani, who is the reason this business exists. Because
he wears the pants
he wears
like
the
actual pants.
He reads the contracts.
Yeah.
He is out there fueling deals for us on a daily basis. And it's like, I need that. And I was really foolish from day one thinking that I could just do this by myself, because it's like, whatever, I can just make shows. But you forget how much work goes in on behind the scenes to actually like stand this thing up on its own 2 feet. And then we have 2 original members of the team, Ari Kagan, Damien Busenek, who were the people that I made those original shows and Mad Realities with, who continue to make our shows now. And so this is the first time where like Boy Room Season 2, we have an Emmy-nominated director named Ali Vidi, and like we're starting to incorporate new people on the creative side of things. And I think that's the first sign of life that this is becoming a bigger industry.
Yeah.
Where you get to start working with like actual traditional talent.
Yeah.
In making shows that live on TikTok.
It's kind of like when movies first attracted TV producers, or the other way around when TV got cool again.
Exactly.
And they were like, oh,
when the golden age of TV, right? When it's like movie actors would never dare act in a TV show because it meant your career was over.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're looking at HBO and Big Little Lies has 5 of the most famous actresses alive. Like that's a turning point for television. We're not there yet, but I will say the conversations I have with all the major agencies are them saying, hey, this major A-list talent is insecure about the fact that no one in the digital world cares about them. Couldn't you maybe think about a TikTok show for them? And like my answer, truthfully, is like, if they're down to get in the mud a little bit, I'm not having a Star Wagon for them. Like if they are actually incredibly passionate about something,
services.
If they want to craft this thing with us, I am so game. If they just want this for like a vanity project and they want to phone it in, I have zero interest.
Have you had any celebrities that are like fucking game?
Totally.
Yeah.
And like now
I
it's
like
just
that answer because that means like something's happening that he can't talk about. It's like, yes.
But again, like that's the exciting part. And like we did see that with YouTube. Like I think, there's a guy named Michael Ratner who runs a really great company called OBB. And like I credit him for turning YouTube into more of a traditional space 10, 12 years ago, where YouTube was at this turning point when viral videos were happening every single day. And he was like, hey, Kevin Hart, you should have a YouTube show. And you guys are going to be in an ice bath and you're be asking each other's questions. And that gets 2-3 million viewers an episode. And of course, it's very brand friendly. And all of a sudden, Kevin Hart has a way younger audience than he probably had before. And he did that a lot. He did it with Hailey Bieber, and that was what started her makeup product Rhode. And so I actually really credit Michael Ratner as like one of the founding fathers of this space. And I think we're just seeing a brand new space get developed, which is not the 18-minute YouTube space. It's like the 90-second to 2.5-minute short form space.
Is there days you don't want to do this?
Never.
No.
Like that's the thing. It's like
you don't get sick of it. You're not
there are
just
days
like,
that like I don't want to go to my office in
overwhelming.
Columbus Circle.
Yeah.
But I am, like I said, I'm truthfully addicted to TikTok. And so like for me, the idea that like I can make things that people around the world are going to watch and love, how can you be against that? It's the greatest job on earth. And it's just weird for me because it feels like this is the culmination of everything I've ever worked on in my entire life. But I do often pinch myself being like, I can't believe I get paid to do this.
Yeah.
I would pay to do this.
And so how does the company work? Is it still kind of like you raised money and you're trying to get to, I see the monetization road now, but you're trying to bridge that gap from.
So we raised an original round, $700,000, like literally nothing. You realize how nothing that is when you have it and are spending it all of a sudden.
Yeah.
We are profitable.
Yeah.
And what we do is once at a time we do a branded show that we don't put our name on, where we work with a major Fortune 500 level company, create some social series for them, and our margins are good enough there, like that alone pays for the business to exist. The question becomes, if we can make a show like Boy Room for $48,000 and get a Hollywood-sized deal from one of the biggest companies on earth to integrate a sponsorship, we should be making a lot more $48,000 shows. And so I think the question that we're having right now is like, what does this next phase look like? Does that mean raising another round? Does that mean getting some sort of development deal with a traditional Hollywood studio? Like, we're exploring a few different paths forward this fall.
You don't know what it is yet.
Don't know what it is yet. And what's
It's exciting.
And what we sit there and debate all day long is like, we can continue to bootstrap this company. Like, this company is profitable. We know that for every branded show we make, we can make probably one other brand new show. And so it's tempting to say, like, let's just continue to own as much of this company as we own.
Yeah.
But then you do get nervous. Like, what I get nervous about is, like I said, I get sent decks every single week from other people that have my shows in them.
Yeah.
And people are saying, like, we want to make the boy room of this. And I'm like, oh, we invented a language.
Yeah.
And people are starting to learn the language. And this is not going to be a space where we're the only company in anymore. So how do we build a bigger moat around ourselves? How do we not have one boy room, but 10?
What are some shows that you love that aren't yours?
In the digital space, again, it's tough because there really aren't that many, like, quote unquote shows. Again, I love Subway Takes. I think Kareem is just like one of the most talented people.
So
on
good.
earth. It's really fun to have seen that show go from being like a New York secret to like truly a late night show at this point. And so, like, I am lucky enough to call Kareem a best friend and an investor. And like, I'm excited for us to work on something together again. But I think, like, when I say, like, what are the shows that I love most, it's like, it's TV shows, it is Judge Judy. It's like, it's things like that where I'm like, that's what I'm looking at of what I want to be creating.
Yeah. I don't remember the exact story, but like, I think T-Pain discovered that he has like there was a message request folder and there was like Rihanna in there or something like that. That's my story with Kareem, where like I discovered that message request was a thing.
That's
and
right.
Kareem was like, hey man, I like what you're doing. I was like, what? And I just reached out to him. I was like, dude, you're not going to believe this, but I, as a grown man, don't know what message requests are. I'm like the T-Pain of Instagram, but love Subway Take. It's so simple.
Yes.
And so I don't think that could die ever. Like, as a New Yorker, I could watch it forever.
And I think when you reach that critical mass, which it has at this point, it is now a late night stop. Like, every person who's plugging a movie or a book or an album now has Subway Takes on their press tour.
Right.
It's cemented now. That's not going away.
Yeah.
And we always say to Kareem, we joke it, he has the greatest job in the world, because literally what he does is he has everyone meet him at one subway stop.
Yeah.
They all get on the train with him, and then they ride it all the way to one side and then all the way back, and the job's done. And it's like, that's the greatest job in the world.
Yeah.
How do we get to do that?
How do you think what you were doing has helped you do what you are doing?
I was always scrappy. Grew up in LA, was obsessed with movies and TV shows since the day I was born. Didn't come from a Hollywood family, so I think it like made me want it that much more. Went to an all-boy high school that had zero families in film whatsoever. Didn't even have a digital video class. And I was so frustrated with that I was like, I'm going to start a film festival just to like have something at the school I can even do in film. Emailed literally every high school in the country during every class. Like, I just stopped doing work at a certain point. My junior year of high school, I'm emailing every high school in the country to get them to submit their students' films to this festival. And then I'm bothering every contact I can find at companies to sponsor this festival. And then trying to get like some of my heroes to be guest judges at this festival. I, at the time, was obsessed with Casey Neistat, and I reached out. I was like, hey, Casey, I'm set 16. Can I have you be a guest judge at my film festival? And he's like, fuck it, sure, why not?
That's amazing.
And in fact, also, it was around the time that Sony had gotten hacked by North Korea for releasing The Interview, and everyone at Sony Pictures' emails was public on WikiLeaks, and so you could also type in like anyone you looked up to his name and find their email. And so one of the people I reached out to was Brian Lord, who's one of the heads of CAA, and I reached out to him saying, hey, I need a guest speaker for my film festival. I'm like, so sorry to be in your inbox, but like, can you help me? I'm this 16-year-old in LA. And to my shock, someone like Brian Lord responds and says like, I'm going to put someone in my office in charge of getting you a guest speaker. And that entire experience ended up turning into an article in the New York Times. And I was 16, and I mentioned this guy, the writer, can you mention I'm looking for a summer internship? And like, that was the way I got my first jobs in the industry. Flash forward a year, I ended up not going to college. I didn't want to leave LA. I had just started meeting people. I decided to start a podcast. I was like, I'm going to go interview my industry heroes as an excuse to meet them.
Yeah.
Ended up talking to everyone from, former vice chairman of NBC Universal, Ron Meyer, to Oscar-winning producer John Lesher, who did Birdman, to the Duplass brothers. Jay Leno was actually the first interview ever.
Oh, shit.
And most of these people, at the end, I would ask for an internship. And so there was always this like catch me if you can part of my life where it was just sort of like, no one's going to get it for me. I have to do it myself. And I would say like the thing that relates to what I'm doing now is when I started my first production company, it was 2020, it was February 2020. 2 weeks later, we're in lockdown. And we're like, what the hell are we going to do now? But being a younger production company, not having a real slate that we had to commit to, my first thought was all of my talented writer friends are home and have nothing to do. They've also never been given a real opportunity to be in this industry. And like we have this one-time great equalizer where no one's doing anything right now. And in fact, all the most famous actors in the world are sitting in their bedrooms watching Netflix. What if I can get my writer friends to write about what we're going through right now, scripts? And what if we made a radio drama where I can get these actors then be in it? So we ended up calling it Day by Day. We launched it within 4 weeks of the pandemic. Ended up doing over 25 episodes. And we had everyone from Lucas Hedges to Cami Mendes, Sydney Sweeney, Madeline Klein, Madeline Petch, Lucy Hale, and even older actors like Margot Martindale and Pamela Adlon, all these amazing people. Did it for $100 and got 1 million downloads. And like that was the first in my life that I experienced this feeling of like, okay, had I pitched this in the traditional system, it probably would have taken 2 years to come out, at which point we wouldn't have been in a pandemic
And people would have been
anymore.
too busy. Yes.
And like we found a way to do the impossible by having actors record audio on their iPhones in their bedrooms. And the most talented sound designer friend of mine named Beckett Cerny, who actually would like make these things sound like a movie. And it was like, it is possible. Like, don't let Hollywood tell you that it isn't. And so I think like ever since that moment, I've always had this in the back of my head of like, you don't need them. You can just do it. The tools have never been cheaper. The power is in your hands. You don't need them. And I think that's what's really scary for Hollywood is like the thing that they used to be able to offer is not only a big budget, but distribution. The distribution just means access to being in a movie theater and no one showing up.
Right.
We have distribution too, which is being on a platform like TikTok and hoping people do show up. What's the difference at that point?
Yeah.
And I think unfortunately there's still a part of this generation that like wants to get a TV show made at Netflix, even though if you ask them their viewing habits, they probably don't watch anything on Netflix because they want the article that validates them as a filmmaker that says like, this person gets show on Netflix. It's like, well, it must be a big deal. But it's like the economics are making less and less sense. You have less ownership of your show, if any at all. And the truth of the matter is, at best, sometimes you're getting 300,000 viewers an episode on your show. What is that? You know,
And
the
they're making
average
less.
episode of Boy Room gets 1.5 million views of real people.
Yeah.
And I know
Damn.
it because Rachel, who had 3,000 followers when we found her, cannot walk down the block in New York anymore without getting stopped for a photo.
That's crazy. It feels like we're, you know, I was in Morocco like doing this music production thing, and the guy who was the producer, he was like, yeah, we just finished an album, and you know now we are gonna send it out to like record labels and stuff. We just want like a record deal and stuff. And I was like, why? And I was like, what does a record label do? And he couldn't describe it. And then I was like, okay, why do you want it? And he's like, and then like, I think like an hour of him talking later, he was like, I think I just want like that thumbs up.
He wants a stamp.
He just wants a stamp to say, I'm legitimate. And I was like, is it going to help you get shows? And he's like, not really. Is it going to help you get plays? Like Spotify. And he's like, no, not really. And I was like, what is it going to help you get? Like this record label deal that you're asking, it's just going to take away your money if you make any money. And he was just like, he emailed me like 2 days ago. He was like, man, I've been thinking about that conversation ever since, because in his mind for like the last 12 years, he's been trying to chase a record deal. That even now he's like, this project will get a record deal. And if I could give him a record deal tomorrow, and just like, you have a record deal, here's this paper, anything you make, I'll take 20% of. He would just feel legitimized.
Totally.
And I think it's such a weird thing that I think do you think there is a cutoff after which people don't want Netflix shows and record deals?
Not until we turn this into a legitimate space. You know, like I think, look, the success of Boredom has changed our relationships with comedians, right? Like comedians are knocking on our doors being like, how do we get to do this? Because like in the world of comedy, what I often say is that you better hope you're good at crowd work right now, because otherwise, like, how are you going to make a name for yourself? There's no Comedy Central, there's no Funny or Die, there's no College Humor. And so it's like, make viral skits on the internet, which are fleeting and no one really remembers you for, or be good at crowd work, and then great, you'll get more
Crowd
stand-up
work,
gigs.
make content.
That's it.
Put out content, yeah.
And so we want to exist in this in-between space of like, what are the shows that Comedy Central would have been making today if television still really existed? And how do we go make those shows with burgeoning talent? And like, the fun part of democratized media is like, I don't care if you have followers or not. I care if you're funny. I care if people can fall in love with you, because that's the only thing that matters. But on the note of the record label of it all, I also think it gives complacency, because it makes you think that these people that know best are looking out for me. And they're not.
Yeah.
You are one of 1,000 people in a factory, and they know that 850, 900 of them are not going to work.
Yeah.
You don't know that. You think you are that one out of 100, and maybe you are. But I see this happen in Hollywood too, where like friends of mine will sell scripts to a network, or get a project in development, and you check in with them 4 years later, they still had nothing come out. They still have that project in development, and now they're no longer the young whiz kid who was coming out of Sundance. They're in their 30s, and they've been developing this thing in secret for 4 years. And so I want to shake young filmmakers by the shoulders and say, like, this idea of spending $100,000 in a short film to get into Sundance, even if you win Sundance, it doesn't change anything. You are going to have that short film be on a Vimeo page that has 100 views behind a paywall, behind a
But it's gonna have the Sundance leaves on it, dude.
Who cares? You're like, wouldn't you rather have 2 million people be saying, holy shit, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen?
There's a filmmaker friend of mine that was working on the short film for a really long time. And that's the other thing, like really working on it for a really long time without like, I've never seen it. I'm one of his closest friends. And he said, I've been working on it. And I was like, what's next? And he's like, we're going to submit it to Sundance and show it. I was like, have you ever been to Sundance? And he's like, no. And I was like, why the fuck do you want to show it at Sundance? Like you've never been there. I've never been there. Like, what is Sundance? And he was just like, no, man, like you don't understand. That's how like films work. We got to do that. And I'm like, why?
Well, and this is the funny thing. Like people, in Hollywood, everyone's looking for IP right now, whether it's a reboot, a remake, a sequel. Like if you're going to spend $100 million in a project, you better know that you have like some sort of audience waiting for what it is. Filmmakers can be IP too. And there's a reason where the biggest filmmakers today came of a different time, right? Christopher Nolan didn't start making movies yesterday. He started making movies in the 90s. And sure, you can say that there are newer filmmakers like Greta Gerwig who have the biggest movie of the year. I'm sorry, the biggest movie of the year was Barbie. It's an existing piece of IP.
It's IP.
In my opinion, in order for us to have a new generation of filmmakers that actually can get original films made at the A24s or Warner Brothers or whatever, they have to make a name for themselves. And they're not going to make a name for themselves at Sundance because, to your point, the average person doesn't know what that is.
Yeah.
And so you can make a name for yourself by being the most talented person on a platform that right now doesn't have that type of storytelling. Don't you want to be the next Spielberg? Like, that's what he would be doing if he was a young person today.
I have 1,000 more questions, but we're out of time. Thank you so much for doing this, dude. Like,
thanks for
seriously, this is so fun. And so, like, everything that you're doing seems like I saw you at Cannes and I was like, what is he doing here? What is he doing here? Because, like, when we talked, I was like, this guy's, what you're doing is genius and so fun. And I wanted to quit my job and come work with you. But then I was also, like, at this Cannes advertising festival where I was like, these people don't understand me. How would they fucking understand you? I got feedback about our agency yesterday from like a consultant or something, and I'm like, well, the perception is that Mojo Supermarket can't do traditional work. And I was like, that's a great perception.
Yeah, like, great.
That's great. And they were like, you need to change that if you want to make any money. And I was like, I like that that's our perception. We do Facebook and we do just pretty big brands. And I saw you at Cannes and I was like, these people don't understand who you are and what you're doing, and amazing for you to show up there. And I was like, it's gonna take like 6 years for them to be, but I was like, okay, wait, what is he doing?
Yes. And then they'll tell you it was their idea.
Yeah, 100%. They'll be like, oh, Adam, we've seen Adam here. Like, we've been friends for a long time. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for
I'm
having
a very, very big fan of everything you're doing, and really excited to see this like next run of shows. Thank you, man.
That was great.
Sick.